Yeah.
The world is changing.
By the
Anyway,
way, I think we need a note here that no animals were harmed in conducting this podcast.
Yeah, I didn't actually carry out that experiment. Hello and welcome to episode 228 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 3rd of August. I hope you've had a good week and you are well and staying as sane as you feel you need to. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO and trusted advisor. And you can come and say hello and find me and my guests and all the things we talk about on rockstarcmo.com and Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn. And we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This week, Jeff Clark is back in the marketing studio and we reach for the stars as we chat about a technique for discovery when developing a marketing strategy. And Robert Rose is in our virtual bar with a cocktail and a fascinating thought on marketing generalists and specialists. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day, my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, and I'm delighted to say we are back in the marketing studio with Jeff Clark, our resident strategy advisor and former Forrester research director.
Ian, welcome to the Rockstar Studio. I'm back to open the door for you.
Yeah, you are. It's good to see you, man. How was your break?
The break was excellent. A lot of time with family, grandkids, and lots of friends and stuff like that. So it was a bit hot during that time. We had some hot, humid weather here in New England, but that seems to have broken a bit. So yes, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit of warm weather coming through now for a change. So we've got quickly onto the weather. So we're back in stride after a few weeks off. So that's good. Yeah, we got some good weather today. And obviously while we had our little break, I spent a little bit of time in Spain as well. So I've enjoyed a bit of good weather too.
Awesome.
And, Did you miss us while you were away?
I did. I would have. When you have a lot of family around, every once in a while you need a little break from the family. So I didn't get many breaks. So it would have been nice to go. Although my son and his family were sleeping in my studio. So
oh wow,
that made it tough.
I wondered what all these baby toys are doing here. Yeah. So we and I think the listeners would have missed you because I've been doing all sorts of shenanigans while your back was turned. So we had Kathy on the show last week. I read a chapter from that book that we talked about, and which gives us a nice little segue onto the topic of today.
Today.
So today, in the last episode you were on, episode 225, you were kind enough to ask me about the chapter of a collective book I'm writing. And last week, I don't know if you heard, and I'm not going to ask you whether you listened to last week's show, Jeff, otherwise I'd be embarrassed by the answer. I read the chapter out loud to our long-suffering listeners. So if you listened last week, thank you very much for bearing with me on that.
It's like books on tape. This is great. That's great.
It was. I definitely need to work on my audiobook presentation or spend a few more hours editing, I think. But anyway, hopefully it came across okay. And one of the things that we discussed in 225 and also that I covered in this collective book chapter that I'm writing is the topic of stars. So we're going to cover the topic of stars on your first week back. And I should explain, if you missed last week's episode or decide to skip past me reading out a chapter of my book, or you missed episode 225, I am referring to the stars model from Michael D Watkins' classic business book, The First 90 Days. But before we dive into stars, or maybe it should be we should reach for them.
Yes, we don't want to die.
And of course, I should be making some reference to Rockstars here, but I haven't.
We haven't figured that one out. Oh, yeah. Well.
Normally we're up with the daft music analogies, but not this time. But maybe a quick reminder of the importance of the first 90 days for marketing leaders. What say you, Jeff?
Well, let's see. I remember getting this book, many years ago. I can't remember even how long ago it was, but it certainly is the hot book. Actually, a lot of CMOs that I've seen like come on to the job. It's like, oh, I look at the shelf. Yeah, there's the first 90 days.
Yeah.
And there's a line in it that I picked up in a quick reread is that, the president of the U.S. has 100 days to prove their worth because, there's always what's the 100-day review? But a CEO or a senior, executive has only 90 days, because it seems kind of arbitrary, but,
yeah,
that's a first quarter business, or that's, you've done your, you've interviewed your colleagues, you've interviewed your team, you've done a lot of your discovery work. Maybe a lot of that actually happened during your interview process. And so now it's time to get going. And the one of the things that I picked up a quote from an article from Harvard Business Review that I think your review from Mr. Watkins was, he says 87% of the 143 senior HR professionals who responded or agreed to a survey that he did agreed or strongly agreed with the statement, and in quotes, transitions into significant roles are the most challenging times in the professional lives of managers. And I think that's definitely true because, one of the things that we talk about a lot is that, oftentimes you come into a role, and you're thinking it's going to be just like your last role. And it's like, this is where this model really just helps open your eyes up to say, oh boy, it could be wicked different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first 90 days was actually published by HBR, wasn't it? Or it was out of a HBR article. So
yes, it is.
Yes, I'll include a link to that. And also
I have a copy here for people who are on video. No, oh, sorry, this isn't on video.
No, this is not on video. But, so Jeff is holding up his copy, and behind me, I have to move. I can point at my copy that's on the shelf behind me. Although when you reverse the video, it's quite difficult to actually point at things. Yes. So there you go. When you're looking at the screen. All right. So where were we? So the first 90 days essential, as you say. But the thing I quite liked about this, and something that I went into with this funny little chapter that I'm writing, is that we tend to sort of talk about B2C and B2B marketing like they're two things. But if we were talking about B2C, we wouldn't say, oh, marketing shoes is the same as marketing insurance, right? But in B2B, we tend to lump it together, but it isn't one thing, is it? You need to understand the category you're in and the kind of company you're in and your position in the market. So that's really what the STARS model covers, doesn't it? And the acronym stands for Startup, Turnaround, Accelerated Growth, Realignment, and Sustaining Success. And it covers that bit of discovery you were talking about in your first 90 days. By the way, when we refer to the first 90 days of being a CMO and how critical it is, we're not suggesting the tenure of CMOs has gone so far down that it's now 90 days.
Yeah, right.
You do get a little bit longer than that, but
Yeah, right.
it sets the tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So what did you think of this model?
Well, I think that, I think it's excellent. And one of the things, and we were discussing this a little bit, I mean, as much as like when I was at Serious Decisions and we had a model for everything, we didn't have a model, perhaps because this, was well entrenched or, but it's like we didn't have one to address this specifically because, I mean, it is, as you said, it's kind of a great way to reorient somebody who's coming into a role and, you may rely, as we kind of mentioned, we may rely on the skills and the strategies that, work for you in the past, but, that's not necessarily going to be, what's going to work. And as a matter of fact, in the HBR article, it says, that is exactly a mistake. Because the STARS model says, you got to have a new perspective. You've got to say that, if we're in a startup mode or we're in a realignment mode, I mean, there's just so many different ways you need to be thinking about your planning and your team and your actions. Unless, I certainly have known CMOs and other marketing leaders who have kind of like, they have a thing that they do, they're a realignment executive, they'll go in where the situation stinks and they'll figure out where the talent is and what the strategy should be. And then, they'll fix it. Or they're a startup demand gen guy and they'll go in and for small companies, they'll set all the processes and everything and put it in place. And then when they're done with that, it's like time to turn it over to the accelerated growth guy, So, that can work for some people, but it's more typical that I think you go into different situations, particularly if you're, like we've sort of been in the same kind of tech market for a while. And so, you jump from a company that's from I did business process management to language translation and, and customer experience platforms from, HR applications. And so, I think then you got to really understand, as you said, not just the market, but the company and what's the position this company is in.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I also thought, and what you just referred to there as well is that whilst we're going to talk about a model and we're going to talk about the kind of company that you're working in, there is I don't think it's a hard and fast rule. And the other thing is as you said, companies change, don't they? And something might impact a company in a single quarter and then changes them from one sort of kind of growth to a different kind of thing, or they do an acquisition or get acquired or something happens. So I think it's interesting when you're saying that, B2B marketing leader can kind of specialize on a particular kind of company. I think that would be quite difficult, wouldn't it? Because you're going to find yourself a duck out of water if you're not careful.
Yeah, there was a company I was at for 10 years that went from being kind of a stable growth company to to me working in a product line that needed to be sort of realigned to going into acquisition mode to become a different kind of company. And it's just like over the 10 years, I mean, we probably went through 3 or 4 of these stars,
Oh gosh. Yeah. And we haven't even got to the stars yet. And you've made another excellent point there, which is that if you work for a multi-product, multi-division company, each of those products and each of those divisions is going to be in a different place in its own market, isn't it? So
exactly.
And especially if you're the CMO over looking over a portfolio of these things, you need to be very sensitive to what your objectives are going to be, because they're going to be different, aren't they, depending on who you're serving at that particular point. That's a really interesting point. All right, so I've waffled on about stars and kept saying stars, but haven't really explained what each one of them is. So let's dive in again. Let's reach for the stars. That sounds so terrible. I'm not going to say that ever again. Let's go through each. And what I thought we'd do is we'll go through each 5 and discuss the challenge and opportunities for each of those and what you've seen in each of those areas, Jeff. So let's start with startup. And I think the definition of startup is fairly self-explanatory, isn't it? And it could be that you're in a and it could be that you're in an entrepreneurial unit within a larger organization. But typically, this is a startup just been funded or getting some early stage funding, and we're off. So what are the challenges there?
Well, the challenge is you're building everything from scratch. And so you've got to figure out, what are my first investments? Who am I going to hire? What kind of tech do we need? That's kind of the basis of our tech landscape. Are we working with some agencies because we don't necessarily are not fully hired in certain areas? So we need outside work. And what are the strategies that I need to work with the limited resources, and I need to be picking things where I can have early wins that help advance the company and in its growth. And one company I was at, very early stage of trying to sell word processing software. Back, I'm dating myself because back when there was more than one company doing word processing, and it's like everything we did was around PR, product reviews, a couple of key conferences, and then assisting our resellers. And that was it. That's really all we could do. And so it focuses you. And there's lots of possibilities, but it's limited. And you gotta put those blinders on, or otherwise you're gonna
Well, that's what I was going to say. I absolutely agree with the challenges. I mean, the skills challenges, you need to be incredibly T-shaped, don't you, in terms of that way. And the other thing, as you were saying, you've got limited. Well, even if you've got a great budget, you've got limited focus for spending that budget, and you need to be incredibly disciplined with your time and what you devote it to, right? In that way. So I thought it was interesting. And it's funny you say word processing, because on Amazon Prime Day, for some reason, Amazon was promoting to me a Word Perfect package. It still exists?
Yes,
apparently. I don't know who buys it, but it still exists. Yeah. All right. So those are the challenges for if you are working with a startup. What are the opportunities here?
Well, I think the opportunity is it's kind of like the sky's the limit. You're reaching for the stars. No, you're on.
Sorry, I thought we said we weren't going to say that anymore.
Well, you said you weren't going to say it. But you get the opportunity to kind of, from the CMO's perspective, to build things right from the very beginning. So. Yeah. There's no baggage. There's no, you don't have to do a lot of firing people to bring in new talent. It's like, it's a blank slate, and there's no preconceived idea of what works. And
I might challenge you on that one.
Okay.
Because everybody's got a fucking idea about how marketing should work.
Yeah, really. That's right. That doesn't apply to marketing, I guess. But I think that's the opportunity. It's like the sky is kind of the limit, and so you're trying things out, and it's probably very quick to understand whether something's working or not working. So being able to be agile at the very beginning is an easier lift than it is when you're a staid old big enterprise.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I'm in that situation right now, right? My primary client right now is a startup, and we're putting in all the processes and all the things. And what I enjoy, and I've worked with a number of small companies, what I enjoy, and I don't know if you've got the same experience, is that you can clearly see the impact of the marketing that you're doing. And it's that whole T-shaped thing. You get to play with all the toys, right? Now that is slightly overwhelming. And of course, it does require you to have a very broad generalist kind of marketing experience. And these days, as marketing discipline has matured, then people are tending to specialize, I think. And so, you're a performance marketer or a growth marketer or whatever. But I think that's a wonderful opportunity. I think working with a small company, any marketer should give it a go, because you get to see marketing in the raw, don't you? You're not sort of 5 stages away,
Yeah, I had a colleague when I worked at, a company that had grown to be fairly sizable. I can't remember exactly what the revenue was at the time when he had to leave, but he ended up going to a startup, and so going from maybe $500 million company to a startup, and he was like, "Wow, I'm really excited because I get to try this and I get to try that, and some of the things you taught me about, I get to put into practice."
And it's completely unfiltered because it's all on you. You do it. There's no sort of committee meetings. There's nothing like that. And I've also had the opposite challenge too, which is that, the last CMO, big CMO role that I had last year was I worked for an acquisitive company. So I was getting people on the team, marketers on the team, who were used to working a little bit like that, a little bit more Wild West. And then I'm trying to impose a discipline of a multi-geo, multi-product, 300-person company discipline onto them, and that was a different experience, shall we say? So, what's been your experience with startups? We've kind of covered that, haven't we? Your experience there,
yeah. I think
so we'll move on to.
Let's go to the next one.
All right, so we'll move on to
T.
The T of stars, which is turnaround. So this is, and I've worked in an organization like this. So this is a company that's probably had a fresh injection of investment, maybe a new management team. It's not been doing terribly well. Perhaps it's been in a bit of the doldrums. There, somebody has seen some latent value in it, and we need to push on. So, would you agree with that as the definition there, Jeff?
Yes, yeah, yes. And I think the challenges here are, you're under pressure to produce results, right? Things have not been working very well, and you probably need to make some painful choices on cutting staff, reorganizing staff, putting people in different positions they're not used to. But you're there to re-energize a demoralized team and the people who are relying on marketing. Sales probably has a lousy opinion of marketing, and you're there to prove that it can work for them. And
I love that. Can I just
sure
underline that point, verbally underline, if that's a thing? is that I like that word, re-energize, because I think too much of this could be on the negative. Absolutely, you need to right size the team and all those sort of things, and change the process and things like that. And many people around you are going to be tired, not just the marketing team, the sales team, everybody. It might be like that. Plus, if a new management team has come in, they may have lost some colleagues, and there's a lot of change happening, and everybody loves change apart from when it happens to them, right? So
yes, that's right.
But I wanted to emphasize the re-energize role that we play as leading the marketing team, right?
Yeah. And I worked at a company that where that was starting to evolve into a multi-product company. And it had created a new product line. It had, I think, acquired another product line. But the emphasis came off of the platform that was generating the revenue, and so it's like nobody paid any interest in it. It's like, well, that's just going to make money. We're just going to we're not going to worry about that. And yet the team that was supporting that platform was pretty demoralized. And it was primarily sold through independent software vendors. So your channel was also kind of like, well, what the hell's going on? And they needed to be re-energized as well. And so in that case, a lot of what we had to do was rebranding, naming, messaging, talk about how this product works in sort of the new hot markets, how it's differentiated from sort of the bigger guerrilla players that have sort of taken over the market. And actually, it's something that it's for my career. I think it's one of the things that I had the biggest impact on, because I was able to get people interested in this product and let it continue to grow from a revenue perspective. And it still exists today, even though I'm talking about probably 20 years ago or more.
All right, so we're touching there on some of the opportunities for us as marketing professionals in these kind of businesses. What do you think the opportunities are?
So usually people recognize that change is necessary. So it's like, little wins can go a long way. And that was the sort of thing I experienced, is like, you do a couple things and people say, wow, yeah, we could actually make something out of this, this product line. And your internal stakeholders are usually open to offering support to you. It's like, if everyone realizes this is a turnaround, everyone wants to chip in, because we're gonna make money out of this thing. And particularly like if in the situation that I was in, where the other products hadn't really started becoming big revenue generators, they were kind of like getting the analyst press and the excitement and the so it was kind of changing the character of the overall organization. But people recognized we needed to get the
Yes.
the old staid, money maker, making more money.
Yeah, I've worked for a turnaround earlier in my career when I was running pre-sales, and they in order to regenerate the team, they had to fire 2 people for me to join. So it's all a bit of a peculiar situation when I joined. But anyway, they had to let them go. I don't think firing was the right word, but those are the first 2. So we talked about startup, we talked about turnaround. So the next one is accelerated growth, which is a little bit similar to what we've just discovered. So again, presumably this is not a turnaround where the company was previously failing. They've had some success, but now they've got a fresh impetus, a fresh injection, probably investment again, probably new leadership, and they're off into the races and they want to accelerate. So what are the challenges for a senior marketer in that kind of organization?
This can be, as one of the things I was thinking, this could be the fun one. Startup can be fun. And then this is where it can get fun again, is that because, to accelerate growth, you're trying to build scale. So you're putting in new systems, new processes, you're adding to the team. So there's, new hires, and there's probably reorienting current staff, but it's like you're not necessarily trying to get rid of staff to add staff. So it's like you can sort of make people happy as well as, get the skills that you need to, to scale up. And so, one of the organizations, I worked at a couple of organizations that were actually in this accelerated growth phase. And one in particular, we had to double everything. The CEO was just intent on whatever it was, we're customer engagement. We got every year, double it, user conference attendance. That he didn't want to double it, but let's 50%. Let's go faster than the company or the revenue growth. Partners involvement actually. So in that case, we sort of started to create a partner marketing arm as well, and so partner sponsorship and involvement. Big. So everything had to ramp up quick, and and so a lot of the processes we had to put in place, formalize kind of the lead and opportunity handoffs, formalize how we mastered data, because actually one of the ways that we could prove that we were increasing engagement is like figuring out how we could capture all the data. So, and then again, putting in a new partner marketing function and kind of supporting that. So it's a lot of exciting things. Certainly, if you come into it with some experience, you're like, wow, here's where I get to try things that I've wanted to do in the past and may not have been able to.
Yeah, like you say, very similar to a startup, but you've got the team presumably already on board. You've got something
a foundation
in place, and I think the tricky thing there, isn't it? And it's the same with a startup, is to ring fence some of your time in order to focus on systems and processes that will permit you to scale, rather than spend your whole time on the hamster wheel and doing the tactical stuff, because that's what people need today, right? It's really you get the dopamine from that, don't you? You're serving people, but you've got to spend a little bit of time getting those people, the people, systems, and processes in place, as you say. So, what's the personal opportunity there? I think we've touched it there. We
kind of touched it, because people typically are motivated by growth potential. So they're inclined to work harder. They want to achieve results. There may be bonuses and salary increases on the line. It's like, hey, I helped the company when we doubled over the last couple of years our revenue. So where's my 2x income?
We had this at Zenshare. We had a fresh injection of investment. We had a CEO with fresh ideas, and it was incredibly exciting, particularly in marketing, because you're at the tip of the spear of all that, right? You're repositioning the whole company, and I found that there were people throughout the business, engineering, support, everybody, who was looking at what we were doing in marketing and going, this is so exciting, because it's good for them. It's good for their careers. It's good for what they've got on LinkedIn. They're now working for a brand that they can be proud of. And I think it's incredibly exciting. Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's number 3. That's accelerated growth. So let's move. And the nice thing here is I haven't observed so far, there are 5 effing things. How on earth? I don't know how Mr. Watkins
how did you
realized.
miss that?
Yeah, how did Mr. Watkins realize what our what our editorial policy was on this show, that we needed only
he was ahead of his time.
All right, so I'm going to move on to number 4, which is realignment. So this is where a company is shifting, or their market has shifted and the product needs to change. So a good example of this is where a lot of organizations went from on-prem, in our MarTech experience anyway, we went from on-premise to SaaS, for example, or that the company is completely restructuring how it goes to market and stuff like that. So this is realignment. And I've actually, when I was writing about this, Jeff, and it'd be interesting to hear what you think on this, is I found this one the most difficult to pin down, because I think it's hard to make hard and fast recommendations about being a marketing leader in a realignment company, because you've got to do a bit more discovery about why there's that realignment, because there's so many different reasons.
There are lots of, right.
Yeah. But do you see that as the challenge as well?
Yeah, because you could be realigning, like the company that we both were at that was realigning was, went through acquisition and was trying to create something out of all the acquired pieces. Or it could be that you're late in making changes in a market, and so you need to realign your expectations of what you're able to achieve from a growth perspective, or you need to do a total rebrand because you're viewed as ancient. And so, I mean, there's
tick all of the above boxes.
All the above, or you're all the above. So yes, I agree. This isn't as easy a one size fits all as some of the previous phases we've talked about. And actually, I mean, this gets to some of the challenges, because some of the challenges are, you got to convince the staff the change is necessary. You definitely got to go through and restructure teams, processes, remove poor performing, groups or individuals. There may be skills and things. I mean, I remember consulting as one of the serious decisions for consulting from companies, that it's like, they sort of went through and they got rid of things that they thought were unnecessary, of course, only to find out that they probably were necessary, but they just didn't think so at the time. And you got to come up with a new strategy. So it is really tough. And again, one of the companies we both experienced this, a lot of it was about rebranding, and letting a lot of, and because of it was growing by acquisition, you get a lot of people who are talented, but you got 2 of them. So if you can't, you got somebody to run your marketing communications team, and you got 2 really good ones, and you got to just say, I got to pick one. Absolutely. And say sorry to the other. Well,
that's that. And also, I mean, we've both made a couple of references to acquisition there. And I think that this model is a bit simplistic for that, isn't it? But I think the realignment topic is almost like, it's like all the challenges of a turnaround and accelerated growth without any of the fun. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just hard work, right? So
but it could be that this star is actually a smaller constellation.
Well, tell me. All right. Well, tell me there is some fun. What are the opportunities for being a marketing leader in an organization like this?
Well, there will be pockets of strength, and kind of what I'm referring to. You may have talented people, and staff want to be successful. So if you convince them that change is necessary and that you're part of that change, and I think the at the company we were referring to, which shall not be named, the after a lot of the change happened, there was kind of a year of pain, and then there was a year of success.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but then there was another year of pain for a variety of reasons. But it's like, if you can find out what the pockets of strength are and leverage them, and then start to see, like in some of the other the others, as soon as you start getting some sense of success, you get some wins, then you can build on that. And like with a startup, though, you're only going to have so long of a time frame in which to do all of this. I mean, I think that's one of the charges with challenges that we haven't mentioned with either realignment or a startup is that there is a limited time frame as to how you can get this thing accomplished.
That's true. But the other thing I think that's really key to realignment, I think if you're a startup and you've got a it's baked in that you've got a vision and mission, right? And that you all know what that is. And similar if you've, I guess, with a turnaround or accelerated growth. But I think with realignment, there's a real challenge with comms here, isn't there? And trying explaining a realignment to people is much harder than explaining we're all going to Chocolate Island, right? So, like to stand up in front of a room and say we're realigning.
Yes.
What does that mean? So I think
you've got to have. I mean, this is where when I was thinking about our 5 fundamentals, this is where the story comes into play. It's like, what is our story? We were strong. We were the leader in blah blah blah. And something happened, and now we're going to be the leader in blah
someone
blah blah.
else. Yeah, and that's the other thing about realignment as well, isn't it? Is the leadership team may see the runes and all of that stuff going on in the market and may appreciate that, but there are going to be some people that are wedded to the way things work.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're not going to appreciate that the storm is coming. You know what I mean? And that the burning boat they're standing on is burning. Any more analogies I can use?
Well, one company we call those people at one company. They called them terrorists because it was kind of like we're trying to make this big shift, and yet there's these terrorists that are just like want to say you're doing it wrong. Yeah. So getting people, as we often talk about, getting alignment across the leadership team and within each team is extremely important. And so this is probably one of the phases of the stars where it is the hardest to do that.
Hardest. I agree. And like you said, you've got that reticence, and and also normally you sort of take a data-based approach or something like that, or an anecdotal-based approach to convince people that the new story is correct. But if I had an old CEO who told me that, if you're riding a horse fast enough, and it's not a very nice analogy, riding a horse fast enough, it might die, but you're still moving forward, right? And the hard thing there, I think, in realignment is to communicate to everybody that, something terrible has happened. And they're like, no, everything's fine. We're still moving forward. And by the way, last week I sold the biggest on-premise deal of the year, and I'm fine. And it's like, no, the world is changing.
By the way, I think we need a note here that no animals were harmed in conducting this podcast.
I didn't actually carry out that experiment. I mean, I know that I am a reasonably data-led marketer, but I didn't witness anything happening like that.
Okay,
all right,
good.
so we're doing all right. Well, we're doing terrible for time as usual, but anyway, we've got to crack through the first 4. The 5th one is maybe the least exciting, but I think we'll find some opportunity here, which is sustaining success. So you're probably gone from the turnaround or from the startup, and now you've got the double challenge, which is that you need to do what you've been doing before and keep that going, but also now you're getting to be a bit more of a mature organization and you need to sustain that success. So what are the challenges there, Jeff?
Well, the challenge certainly for the CMO, because again, this is under the premise that your first 90 days of a leader and you're joining. So, you probably had a predecessor who, I don't know, they may have done a good job and they retired or they found another opportunity. And so you've been brought in. And so how do you put in your new initiatives? How do you, make things work the way you want it to work when you're under the shadow of this former leader? So you'd be a little bit of playing defense, and you need to be choosy about what you change because somebody in, one of your C-level colleagues may be saying, well, it was working. Why did you?
Jane did a great job. Why Jane more like Jane?
Yeah, really. And so, but you got to find the key to getting to the next level. And so, when I was actually the one company I'll mention this that I experienced where I was kind of in sustaining success was while I was at Serious Decisions. We kind of had this 20% growth every year, and of course I was on the delivery of services more than on the marketing of them. But a lot of it was coming up with what are new new roles within our client base that we want to serve. What are some new topic areas? We want to talk about Agile because everybody's talking about Agile marketing, or we want to talk about AI because people are talking about. And so, a lot of it was coming up with those new products and services to support that growth in a fairly even measured way. You're not like trying to double every year. You're trying to maintain something, as well as being focused on, I think, because one of the important things is you want to be focused on retention, as well as looking at how you're going to be increasing your revenue with new things.
Well, that's the key thing. I mean, it's like when I was talking about the STARS model, I obviously relate it to awareness, revenue, and trust, and what parts of awareness, revenue, and trust we need to focus on in each of these 5. When I got to this one in terms of sustaining success, is if you then, as you say, need to focus on retention. You need to shift some of your art budget, awareness, revenue, and trust to customer marketing, reducing churn, all that kind of stuff, because it's so easy to run hard as a startup, not put in the right processes, and then you're placing a bigger challenge on sales to keep up your growth, because you're losing customers in the background, right? Especially in SaaS models. So I think that retention word is so important that you shared there. So those are the challenges. What are the opportunities for professionals?
Well, it may be it may be self-evident. I mean, you're starting with a strong foundation. You're likely there's a strong team in place, so people to work with. You may be doing more adapting to the ways they want to work and who's there than it is vice versa. And people want to continue the success. So there's an interest. I mean, kind of like with the accelerated growth model, there's an interest in continuing this pattern. People want to keep getting their bonuses and their raises. So motivation is not as much of an issue, and it may be more of tweaking the strategies than it is actually building from new or crash and burn and be the phoenix that comes out from the flames.
Well, the one thing I would also say about the opportunity, and it kind of plays on the thing that you were mentioning about you being the CMO in the shadow of a former leader. There's a reason why you've been hired, right?
Yes.
So it might be that former leader was a fantastic startup person, very T-shaped or whatever, but was fucking useless at organization and building an actual marketing structure.
That's a really good point.
I think you should have confidence in the decisions that are made around you, in that you were brought in for a reason, and that you're on a mission, and that mission is slightly different than your predecessor. And also the fact is, also the other point, of course, is that you can see a little blueprint for success and what worked before. You just need to tweak it and add a bit more in to do the stuff. So I think that's great. I think I think we're going to go straight to the song, I think, Jeff, because we're coming up to 40 minutes. So we've run out of time, but we will come back to this topic. And I think
we will come back.
One of the things I'd like to chat about is, like I was just referring to the art model that I talk about, but also our 5 effing fundamentals. I think if we chat about how that model, and I'll include a link to that model for any listeners that have forgotten us banging on about it almost every week, is, and what it is that we need to look at in terms of the master plan, the machine, the knowledge, the story, and the campaign. But what song have you selected for us this week, Jeffrey?
Well, I had to do with stars. So Lucky Star by Madonna from 1983 is, she says, "You might be my lucky star." So depending on which one of the STARS you pick, that you do well at, and when I'm lost, you'll be my guide. I mean, I think Mr. Watkins has created a fabulous guide for new leaders, new CMOs.
Well, Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. You are my guide, so I look forward to seeing you again next week. I think I'm
your lucky rock star, aren't I?
Yeah. So will we stick to this topic next week, do you think? Yeah. Okay.
Awesome.
So we'll continue to gaze into the stars or reach the stars or any of those stars analogies next week. I look forward to it. So I'll see you then.
See you then.
Cheers.
Sure. Bye.
Thank you, Jeff. That was, of course, a little snippet of Madonna's Lucky Star. As we mentioned, we will continue to dig into this topic next week. And if you'd like us to dive into a problem you're facing or a marketing topic that's on your mind, give us a shout on email. hello@rockstarcmo.com. Right, it's that time of the week to retire to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a chat with the chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory and my chum, Robert Rose. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. Welcome to the bar. Is it warm there? It's been warm here. It's been very summery here. So it's the kind of thing where we're in the, they call it the classic dog days of summer.
Yeah.
And it's been hotter than hell here. And so with all of that in mind, I have almost a dessert type of drink for us this evening. And it's back in the day, you'll remember when you, because I know you, and you were definitely a disco guy, right? You were definitely a kind of guy who frequented various discos and did dancing and did the white man's over lip bite, when you were dancing, and all of that. That's you, right? That's your
totally.
Yeah. Okay. And then you would go to the bar and you would order grasshoppers. Do you remember ordering grasshoppers?
Oh, I don't remember ordering grasshoppers.
Oh, well, that's a drink here in the U.S. that is very. So grasshoppers are it's a green drink. It's basically made with creme de menthe.
Yeah.
And then there are varying recipes for this depending on where you are, or what bar, or what disco you find yourself in. Whether you just sort of add a little cream to cacao or heavy whipping cream is sometimes also used. And then basically it's just creme de menthe and the heavy whipping cream, and there you go. And it's as sweet as you think it might be, right? It's like a mint, popsicle kind of thing. So I have taken that and made it something that we could actually get our arms around here for summertime, which I'm calling it a Mexican grasshopper.
Ooh, I wonder what this has got in it.
And so what we're doing now is we're going to take a little bit of creme de menthe, just enough to give it the color. But what we're going to add is a little Blanco tequila in there. And so we've got our creme de menthe, we've got a little bit of Blanco tequila, and then a very small teaspoon, and this is where it gets really fun, of ice cream, vanilla ice cream.
Oh, wow.
And you mix those together, and you get to a creamy sort of green tinted, but beautiful. Yeah. And then if you're I'm not a nutmeg fan, but I know a lot of people are, so you can sprinkle a little nutmeg over the top of that. But basically you add the creme de menthe, your tequila into a sort of a mixer, shake it, and then basically put in that scoop of ice cream, shake it until it melts a little bit, and then pour all that into a chilled cocktail glass, and away you go.
That is a really crazy sounding drink. I'd never heard of a grasshopper, and let alone your version of that. That sounds fantastic. I have to give that a go. Definitely have to give that a go. And then where would we be drinking? I mean, it sounds like you've decided where we're going to be drinking these, but where would one drink a Mexican grasshopper?
Well, I think so. I don't know that they have these here, but I just got back from Las Vegas, so I think we have to go to Las Vegas for this because it was bloody hot there. Yeah. But we actually did something really fun. We actually got a cabana out by the pool, and they have all these lovely misters out there and all of that, and then they have the people who come by and serve you drinks and all that stuff. So a cabana by the pool in Las Vegas and we'll make our own. We'll make our own Mexican grasshoppers.
Sounds fantastic. And then, so we're chilling out by the pool, and as it always does with us, mate, the conversation turns to marketing. What are we talking about this week, mate?
Oh, does it really have to turn to marketing? I mean, can we just talk about football or something? Marketing is such a weird place right now.
I don't know enough about American football to help, but you'd have to do all the talking there, I think.
Well, there you go. It is preseason, so we could talk about that. Anyway, yes, let's talk about marketing. So a fascinating thing I'm noticing, this is a broader trend in marketing. So do you remember as a kid, and I think old guys like us remember this, but when your whole family went to the same doctor, right?
Yeah.
Your whole family, And sometimes even that same doctor would show up with a little black bag and basically do a house call and check up all the kids and basically come in and had a stethoscope around his or her neck and would basically, that was your doctor, right? Everybody went to the same doctor as a kid. And then as they grew up, it was the same doctor. And then, as you got older, maybe you saw some specialists or something like that. But that is different today. It doesn't really work that way anymore. For today's younger people, for sure, that seems like just completely alien. And the data show this. When we look at the data for doctors, basically the number of doctors that actually go into not just a specialty, but basically a subspecialty and really focus there. The number of general practitioners has just declined precipitously. And it was interesting because it came up with a friend of mine when, I had this friend of mine who was complaining about being, having a pain in their head. Wow. And I said, you should go see somebody about that. You should go see your doctor. And basically I said, it sounds like you should go see your doctor. And my friend paused and looked at me and went, well, okay, well, which one?
Yeah.
And basically, should he call the cardiologist who had treated him for high blood pressure last year, or should he call the ear, nose, and throat doctor who fixed his ear infection because he has a pain in his head near his ear? Or should it be the ophthalmologist who checks his eyes because it's in his head? Or should it be the endocrinologist who had seen for another thing that he had? Or his primary care physician who he'd have to wait months to see because the practice now has so many patients that he has to wait months to go see this. Now, I know this kind of situation is rarer there in the UK because you actually have a healthcare system, and we don't in the US. But what I have noticed is that this trend is now pervading marketing too, because the decline of the general practitioner in marketing is pronounced. Yeah. And when we see marketing operations now requiring hundreds of niche skills, right? So you've got CRM and e-commerce and marketing automation and content management and customer data platforms and digital asset management and analytics. And all of these specialists are now really revolving around all these things, even functional things, design, editorial, writing, copywriting, social media content, email writing, multimedia creators, event management, all these things that we have to deal with. And doesn't even get into things like SEO and content strategy and influencer wranglers. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. Yeah. And so one sneak peek, we're at CMI, we're actually doing this. We're doing our career survey. We did it last year, and this year we're doing it again. And it was interesting, but about 3/4 of those who identify as content marketers or marketers who also really focus in on content basically say that the specific skill sets to execute against their teams have grown so much that they actually have to go get education to master those special skills, right? They see themselves having to master these niche skills to even remain relevant in the job market. Yeah. And so the question becomes, do you need a team of specialists or do you need generalists these days? How do you build a marketing team? Yeah. And I think, I've written a little bit on this, and so there's a lot of nuance to it. But overall, I think the decision is less important than actually making one, right? In other words, you can build it strategically either way, but what I find these days is that so many companies are not making a decision about doing it one way or the other. And so they're either investing time and resources into developing specialists out of their generalists and not thinking about the ways that that's going to pivot their marketing strategy, or they're hiring a bunch of specialists and they're basically saying, great, but they're siloing each other off into these specialties. So when one specialist leaves, it becomes impossible to replace that person because they have to replace them with somebody that's so specialized. Yeah. So it's actually taking the time, like so many things that we talk about here. It's not necessarily the direction, but it's actually taking a direction and taking a thoughtful approach to it. That is really the idea of building that balanced strategy of in modern marketing, and the acknowledgement that the specialty needs are really there.
Yeah. This is a really fascinating topic, and I'll be interested. When does that careers survey come out from CMI?
I think it's in the next month or two.
Oh, cool. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. But I found, I was the CMO for a acquisitive company, and we were buying lots of little companies that had very small marketing teams or just had a single marketer, and they were all generalists. And then I was trying to shape them into a coherent marketing team by giving them specialist roles, right? So I was creating a product marketing team, a demand generation team, and I found some resistance with some of them because they wanted to remain generalist. So I think there are marketers out there that like to be generalist, and of course, my main client at the moment is a startup, and so I am that T-shaped, generalist because I'm having to have all the plates spinning. So I think that's really interesting. But as you say, I think B2B marketing has got more sophisticated, and you have to dive in quite deep. I mean, things like tools like PPC, there is a specialism there, isn't there?
Well, indeed. I mean, and even down to the different, how many job requirements do I see these days that are down to the literal technology level, right? Where, my old boss and good friend, Jim Howard, who was my CEO when I was a CMO of a software company, he used to talk about how web content management, for example, was an expert system. Like literally, the whole idea of quote unquote business users knowing how to use a web content management system was ridiculous because the systems were so complex these days that you had to be trained to use whichever one you were going to use. And therefore, and we needed to be okay with that. We needed to be okay with the fact that marketing technology in general were expert systems that would be developed in much the same way that, you would develop an engineer how to use, or a doctor how to use an anesthetizing machine or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you see job descriptions these days which say basically you need to know how to use HubSpot back and forth, right?
Yes.
You need to know how to use Salesforce back and forth, right? And if you don't have those skills, you're not going to be hired. And that's at the practitioner level, right? And so you start abstracting that out to analytics and to data and to content and to content strategy and all of that. Layer over the top of that many of those roles, to your point, are temporal, right? In other words, that content strategist, you don't need them forever. You need them to help develop that content strategy, and then you need them maybe, a few. So ultimately, you either have two choices, right? You teach one of your generalists how to do content strategy so that when you implement your CMS, you've got someone who can help do that consciously, or you hire that out knowing that it's going to be temporary. And you basically say, I'm going to bring in a consultant to help us do this implementation. And then when they're done, we're done, right? The problem is that I see, or so many businesses try and force it the other way, right? They've got literally marketing generalists who assume the role of taxonomy creator or CMS implementer, project manager, or content strategist when those people have zero skills in that department. And but because they're in marketing, they should know. So they cram as best as they can to try and learn how to do it, but they don't do a very good job. And then we wonder why so many big MarTech implementations go sideways. Is because you've got your generalists trying to manage the process for a set of experiences that they have no knowledge about at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's it. That project management and actually management at all and partner management, all those, they're different skills. Just because you're a marketer doesn't mean you can manage a CMS implementation.
Right. That's exactly right.
As you say, it's a different
nor should you. By the way, nor should you know how to do that.
What's the so with one of the clients I'm working with, we are doing, weirdly that you said that, we are doing a HubSpot implementation. And what I've done is I've brought in HubSpot specialists that I know that can help us get the project up and running, do some training, and then leave it to the generalist, both on the sales and the marketing team side, operations side. Is that what you're suggesting here?
Well, it's having a plan for that, right? Because the other side of that sword, of course, is you bring in a specialist external to help implement, and then all of a sudden that person leaves, and then it's like, okay, but we still have to do all of this, right? So that knowledge transfer is important, right? I mean, I used to tell the story all the time with CMS implementations of, the marketer would walk into the IT group and they would say, hey, we're having this new CMS to the IT, the head of IT, and they would say, we have this new CMS coming in. Can you support that? And the IT person looks up and goes, yeah, we can support that. And what they mean is, of course, we can support that in our technology environment. But what the marketer heard was, we're experts in this stuff and we can help you implement it and configure it and we can help you operationalize it and make sure it's uptime and all that kind of stuff. And then it isn't until after the implementation is done that all of a sudden somebody goes, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant.
Yeah. Yes. And so when people are looking for specialist content to help train themselves to become generalists.
Oh wow, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that. They can find us at contentadvisory.net. We are a very specific, as Liam Neeson might say, we have a very specific set of skills. So yes, you can count on us there.
All right. And when people spin the dial on the internet, where are they going to find you, my friend?
LinkedIn primarily these days, although I will tell you that I'm spending more and more time on Threads because I just enjoy the chatter that's going on there.
Yeah, I need to make more time for Threads. I can't quite get the habit in on Threads. It's all LinkedIn for me at the moment. That's fantastic. And more importantly for me, or rather selfishly for me, will you be in the bar next week?
I suspect you will, yeah.
All right, I'll see you then. Thank you, Robert. A topic that I reckon we could have spent the whole show on. And if you'd like more on that, have a look at Robert's rose-coloured glasses column at the Content Marketing Institute's blog. You can find it if you search. I'll also include a link to it in the show notes. So that's a wrap on episode 228 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott, and you can find links to me, Jeff, and Robert, along with all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. And thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. I'd love to hear from you, so please say hello or drop us a rating or review in your favourite podcast app, or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff's head is still in the stars and Robert will be back in the bar. In the meantime, have a great week, and I hope you again join me here again next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.